Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Book Hunting. Um, Last Saturday, I had a surprising and truly awesome book hunting experience. Um, I was attending a fundraiser for a local civic group, and I've been to more than a few of these the last few weeks because if you're not a West Virginian, you may not be aware, our party primary election is coming up in around 2 weeks, May 12th. And I'm somewhat involved in the local political scene. So I get to go, well, or maybe get isn't the correct word, but I go to a bunch of these functions, some of which really aren't political, but because you have a large group of voters involved, um, it's a good place to meet people, greet people, make connections in the community. In any event, I was back in my old hometown, Athens, West Virginia, at a spaghetti dinner, and for some reason, just as an aside, for some reason, it seems like most of the fundraisers in political seasons are either pancake breakfasts or spaghetti dinners, neither of which I should be eating under my current diet restrictions. However, found myself at a spaghetti dinner, and since it's from my hometown, Athens, West Virginia, knew quite a few folks there, got to get reacquainted with several folks, including a very fine lady, Carol Bard, who, not in the not too distant past, was actually mayor of the town of Athens. But she was married to the late great Dr. David Bard, who was professor of history at Concord College. Well, now Concord University, but when I was there, it was Concord College. Anyway, one of well, I'd say, yeah, definitely my favorite professor. I wound up getting a degree in history from that institution, and got to know Dr. Bard fairly well. Our senior year, there were a group of us who took his Civil War history class, and as part of that, if you were so inclined, there was a voluntary activity. Once a week, we would meet at his house and play uh, war games, um, paper and map sorts of things. This was the late 80s, so there was no internet, and computer games were very, very limited. But these were mostly maps played out, as I said, on maps with small chits, CHIT, I'm not being crude, chits of cardboard to designate units. And there were random factors. You rolled dice, you moved your troops, whatever. And you were recreating scenarios for this particular group from the American Civil War. In any event, at that time, I got to take a good look at Dr. Bard's private library, which this would have been 35 plus years ago. It was an extraordinary collection then. And as I found out, even more extraordinary current day. Um, Dr. Bard passed away 4 years ago, and I ran into his wife last summer at the Athens Town Social, and we talked. And at that time, she said, "You should come over and look at David's books, see if there's anything you want." And and nothing much came of it. But she was a volunteer at this function I was going to Saturday night, and she came over. We chatted, talked about old times, and she said, "Is there any place you need to be after the spaghetti dinner?" And I said, "No, not really." And she goes, "Would you like to come over to the house and look at David's books?" And it was one of those things where, do I want to look at David's books? Absolutely, do I want to look at David's books? So we left. We went to her house, which was also, of course, in Athens, and was truly amazed at the collection of books that Dr. Bard left behind. Um, Dr. Bard's collection emphasized his interests and tastes, and therefore tons of American history, some other history from Europe, a lot of military history, military science stuff. Just this huge collection, and I wound up taking several books. Mrs. Bard indicated basically she just wants all of these books that were very precious to her late husband to to be in hands where people could appreciate them. And unlike most of the hunts I've done over the last couple of years, I hate to say, a lot of these I'm going to wind up keeping. Like, like I need more. But in any event, I got several books. I did a video that evening um, where I went over, or tried to go over every book and item that I got at that haul. And I will put a link to that video in the description of this video. But I thought I'm going to do a deeper dive on just some of the more interesting things, or things that I thought were more interesting from that collection. Paying a little more attention to, just some details about some of these really extraordinary books. First off, in that video that I'm talking about, that'll be linked below, I actually left out a book. I found this very nice copy, I believe first edition, of H.W. Brand's Traitor to His Class, a biography of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, of course, was a traitor to his class. From an extraordinarily wealthy background, but as you know, the New Deal and the policies instituted were to benefit the working man. At least that was the intent. I don't think oftentimes it didn't work out as intended, and there were a lot of unforeseen consequences from the New Deal. That was the intent. And H.W. Brands, well, Sean, let's show Mr. Brands. He's quite a bit older than that now. This book was probably 15 years old. But and at the time, I don't know if he still is, he was a history professor at the University of Texas in Austin. But an extraordinarily good writer. He wrote a really good biography of Andrew Jackson as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I have, somewhere over on one of the far shelves, I think I have his biography of George Custer. But in any event, since this one didn't make the first video, I wanted to show it first. I've read it. I don't necessarily need another copy. And out of what I got, one thing that will probably get donated to the Hatter Bookshop are things like this: presidential biographies. I've already got one that I'm keeping for President Roosevelt. So yeah, we'll pass this one along. And as always, anything that I say that I'm donating to the Hatter, give them a few days to clean, process, price. If you're interested in either calling them for it or going into the store and shopping for it, like I said, just give them a few days to get things sorted. Now, when Mrs. Bard gave me the invitation to come over to the house and look through the collection, there was one thing I had high hopes of, in my heart of hearts, that would still be there. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Back in the 80s, when we had the wargaming group, Dr. Bard showed us an early box set of the Dungeons & Dragons games called the Holmes Edition, also called the Blue Box set, and so called because all the tones on the box were different shades of blue. It was not there, which is very unfortunate. Would have loved to have that, but I'm not upset because I still got a lot of extraordinary stuff. And so next, I think I want to show you some games I culled out of his game closet. Some of these games we actually played in that group back in the late 80s. The top 4 games are Civil War games. This one on the bottom is a game about the Eastern Front in World War II. And I remember on one occasion he had it set up on a table when we went over for the wargaming group. So I definitely wanted to snag that one. It looked very interesting. Anyway, these are all things I'm keeping. But it's one of those things where nobody really plays these kinds of games anymore. So I don't know what kind of opportunities I'll have to actually play them. But just in case, I'm keeping them. All right. Where else to go? Okay. Another one I'm keeping. This is The Guns at Last Light by Rick Atkinson, the third in his Liberation trilogy. He wrote a trilogy about the American armies in Western Europe in World War II from 1942 to the collapse of Berlin in 1945. I had the first two already in trade paperback, and so when I saw this, I definitely knew I was going to keep it because I wanted to complete the set. Wish it were a trade paperback, but it's just still a very nice book. Uh, and as you may know, I've been trying here over the last couple of years to downsize from hardcovers to trade paperbacks wherever I could. Unfortunately, sometimes things force you to go the other way. The next one I want to show you is A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. From 1492 to the present, and I believe the present was about 10 years ago. It is a history of the United States written from somewhat leftist position. But I do know this. On a couple of occasions, I've been at the Hatter bookstore and people have came in and asked for this book. And normally I would just donate this hardcover to the store, but this book was presented to Dr. Bard as a book award. And it has inscriptions from the president and vice president of the college back in 2000. Yeah, May of 2000. And presented to him specifically. And there were a couple of copies of the program where Dr. Bard, let's see if we can see this here. As you can see, he was the keynote speaker. So, I'm, for once in my life, keeping the hardcover and donating the trade paperback I already had to the Hatter. So, like I say, over the years, a couple people have asked for it. Hopefully somebody will come back in and ask for it. This is a copy of The First Salute by Barbara Tuchman. And there's Miss Tuchman. She is one of my favorite historians. Wrote mostly about First World War era. Also wrote a couple books about the Second World War, and wrote a really good book about medieval history. I forget the title of it. Mirror of something. But in any event, I really enjoy her work. She's one of a few authors that have a special section in my collection. I have all her stuff kind of, set in a special section. I already have a copy of this, and I'm going to decide which one I want to keep and which one I want to donate to the Hatter. Like I say, she's an extraordinarily gifted writer, or was, and I enjoy all of her work immensely. Let's go to something I think very special. This is a full copy of Lee's Lieutenants by David Southall Freeman. David Southall Freeman wrote a multi-volume biography of Robert E. Lee, which became extraordinarily famous and popular. This is about the army that Lee commanded, as I said, in 3 volumes. Now, I've been trying to do some research since the weekend, figure out what edition I've got here. I don't think it's a first. In fact, I'm 99.9% sure this is not a first edition. But I think it might be the 1970 edition, where the original books were published in the 1940s. But this was also a fairly, if it is the 1970s edition, it's one of the more popular ones. And I believe it is. There's the naked hardcover. If it were a first edition, it would be worth, somewhere between $500 and $1,000. This set, if it is, in fact, the 1970 edition, and I think it is, because it seems like these have the maps that were supposed to be in that edition. You're still talking about a $50 set of books. Probably the most valuable thing I had monetarily. Not sure if I'm going to send them out into the world. Once again, I already have a very recent trade paperback edition of this set. But I'll decide pretty soon. And who knows? You may be able to find this at the Hatter before too long. right. Let's go through these next. All right. I got a 2-volume set of the West Point Atlas of American Wars. This is the first volume that goes from the colonial times up to the 1900, I believe. Yeah. So everything from colonial times to the Spanish-American War. And, you know, and I've opened to a random page a map of, let's see if we can get it to focus, the Fredericksburg campaign from the Civil War, 1862. But anyway, it's just a collection of maps with explanatory text for all those conflicts. The second volume goes from the year 1900 to 1953, so to the end of the Korean conflict. And, it has the same sorts of maps. I've opened to a map of the battle for France in the Second World War about a month after D-Day. These I'm keeping. These I'm keeping. Extraordinarily great resources that I hope to enjoy for a while anyway. Let's see, where do we go next? All right. As I was saying, one of Dr. Bard's big interests was military science, military history, and I found copies of a couple of the pivotal works of military science. Sun Tzu's The Art of War, the classic Chinese text uh, about about war as a science. One of the earliest works that attempted to do that. And back in the 80s, this one is an Oxford University Press publication, and it's marked as political science, which makes sense. In the 80s and 90s, you would often find this book in the business section of a bookstore, because that was back when all the corporate raiders and merger and acquisition folks, the Wolf of Wall Street types, they were all reading this as a business manual, business as an allegory for war. But anyway, this will, I already have a nice copy of it, so this one's going to the Hatter. And a more modern manual on warfare. Karl von Clausewitz's On War. Let's see who translated it. Anatole Rappaport. In any event, this was published in the 1830s after the Napoleonic Wars. German writer. He's famous for the quote, war is an extension of politics by other means. In other words, war is just an instrument of, in his mind, war is an instrument of politics. But it's a nice copy of the book. I know people come in from time to time wanting military science books in general. But I also already have a copy of this. I have a nice, somewhere buried back there, I have a nice Penguin Classic of this same book. So I do not need it, so it's going to get donated. Now I have all three of the big military manuals. The Book of Five Rings, The Art of War, and On War. All right. What next? Okay, let's do something pretty. All right. He had these little books, little teeny books. These are books showcasing the Civil War art of Mort Kunstler, one of the most famous Civil War artists of the 20th century. Let's see which one I got. I've got the North, the South, and the North. And I always thought he just did beautiful things with his art. Let's see, what was the name of this unit? The 54th Massachusetts? Yeah. Here is a painting he did of the 54th Massachusetts, a black regiment made famous by the movie Glory. But obviously in this book, it's all Union soldiers. The wraparound cover, showing a nice cavalry charge. I'm going to take a look at these, but I'm going to I'm sure, donating these to the Hatter. Very, very nice books, but I've got to have some limits somewhere, and I've got to give up some of this stuff. So this is probably gonna be one of those things. But yeah, like I say, if you like Mort Kunstler, The Art of the Civil War, um, or shares say Confederate version of the same book, but just painting after painting. And there's one of his works portraying General Stonewall Jackson, for instance. Anyway, coming soon to the Hatter. All right, what's next? Yeah. Unfortunately, another couple of keepers. But I think, at least in the case of one of these books, it's going to be kind of an even trade, or maybe even a net positive for me. I found these two little modern library biographies. I have a section of modern library books. It's one of my favorite classic lines. These are some older ones. This one is a biography of Napoleon by a gentleman named Ludwig. The end papers. Let's see here. Emil Ludwig, originally in German, translated by Eden and Cedar Paul. I have another biography of Napoleon, which I will donate, and it's a good bit bigger than this, so I call that a net gain. This next one is, I believe it was Benjamin Disraeli. A biography of Benjamin Disraeli, who was British Prime Minister during much of the 19th century. Was the guy in charge of England when they were going through a significant colonial period. Um, uh, by the end of the 19th century, England probably controlled a fourth of the Earth's surface, and Disraeli was one of the people who was instrumental in that expansion. Anyway, I'll be keeping that one. Oh, a lot of keepers. Uh, this next one, The Confederate War by Gary Gallagher. I actually got to see uh, Gary Gallagher give a lecture on in Lexington, Virginia at Washington Lee University. Very gifted writer. I enjoy his writing style. The premise of this book is basically how, despite their states' rights rhetoric, the Confederate States of America formed a national identity. But he also explains in his thesis why it wasn't enough for them to win and hold on to that national identity. How popular will, nationalism, and military strategy could not stave off defeat. Anyway, this is gonna be a keeper. Oh, let's see what else we got. Oh, this will be a donate. I've already got a nice trade paperback of this one. Oh, it is another book by Barbara Tuchman, The March of Folly. A book about, The March of Folly from Troy to Vietnam. A book about the, let's do this politely, especially for the current era. A series of essays about the futility of war and the waste of war. As she says, calls it the March of Folly. I'll just say this: very apropos for the days we live in now. We'll leave it at that. There again is Miss Tuckman, and like I say, this will go to the Hatter. I recommend anything you get by Barbara Tuchman. If you're interested in history at all, if you're not interested in history at all, you'll still like her writing. Very gifted writer. And in looking at the dust jacket, I recalled her book about medieval history. It was The Distant Mirror. Very good book about medieval history if you're interested in that kind of thing. All right. In this hunt, I got several Civil War battlefield guidebooks. I was hoping to find some of Dr. Bard's own books. I know he published at least a couple of books, Civil War guidebooks geared to West Virginia. Um, I have one of them, but I was hoping that there would be more of them there. Didn't find any, but he did have quite a few atlases covering the Civil War period. Um, and I have at least three. This is probably the one. If I keep one, this will be the one that I keep, because it's edited and put together by James McPherson, who is a, a very prominent Civil War writer. In my opinion, he wrote the best single volume history of the Civil War, a book called Battle Cry of Freedom, which was the text we used when I was taking Civil War history from Dr. Bard 35 plus years ago. Um, anyway, there were several other, like I say, guidebooks and atlases. This one here was my favorite out of what I found. And we'll finish up with some local history. Local history. Well, let's do Ambrose first. In amongst the collection, I found this collection of Ambrose Bierce's fiction. I believe some other material as well. Let's see what we got in here. Oh, please give me a copyright page. Ah, here we go. This is a collection of his Civil War stories. Probably the most famous of which is an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. I don't know about now, but when I was in high school, you couldn't get out of high school without reading an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and also several of his memoirs, because he himself was a soldier in the Civil War. Um, um, I've recommended his work a time or two. I remember once I was just hanging out in the Hatter, and a guy walked up and says, "I've read everything that Edgar Allan Poe ever wrote. Is there anything, do you have any recommendations or anything kind of like that?" And I immediately thought, well, Ambrose Bierce. He wrote some macabre kind of stories, some ghost stories, some, some stories with those kinds of elements that Poe was famous for. Um, Unfortunately, they didn't have any then. But I have another collection of Ambrose Bierce. I haven't quite decided which, but either this collection or my other collection will be donated to the Hatter. Um, I'll probably donate this one. The other one has a few more of the short stories. I'd rather keep those. And I think the other one also has some of Ambrose Bierce's poetry. See, so he's very much like Poe. Um, did both prose and poems. But anyway, I want to show you that one. And now, at the very end, we'll finish up with some local history stuff. Um, three books by an author, Tim McKinney, who I'm not all that familiar with, but Dr. Bird in his collection had three books about the Civil War in West Virginia. This one's about the Civil War in Fayette County. I know a little bit about the Battle of Carnifex Ferry, but very little else. It was the Battle of Fayetteville. Yeah, where a young Confederate sergeant by the name of, what was his name? Basically, he invented indirect artillery fire. Hang on one second. I had to look it up. A young man named Milton Humphreys, who's a sergeant in a Confederate battery stationed in that area. He invented the concept of indirect artillery fire. In other words, accurately aiming your artillery at a target you cannot see with line of sight. Now, obviously, before that time, there was plenty of uses of artillery where you were shooting at targets you couldn't see. What Milton Humphreys did, though, was figured out how to make the calculations and the measurements and use, the trigonometry and the physics, the calculus to do it accurately. So that if you knew a unit was on the other side of a ridge, you could accurately drop artillery shells on them. In fact, during the Battle of Fayetteville, with the use of this technique, they forced a Union regiment to retreat and leave the scene because the Union troops just couldn't figure out where the fire was coming from, so they had to move to a safer position. But anyway, yeah, that's all I know so far about the Civil War in Fayette County. So I'm gonna probably keep this one at least for a little while. Read up, and who knows, might keeping way too many. Uh, uh, this next book by the same author is Robert E. Lee and the 35th Star. And the 35th Star is a reference to West Virginia. There's the Great Seal of West Virginia, because West Virginia was the 35th state admitted into the Union. And this is a story about Lee's campaigns in what is now West Virginia, then Western Virginia. At the time, he was commander of Virginia's military forces, and later, through serendipity and the injury of another general, became the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, which was not just Virginia, but troops from all over the Confederate States of America, but that fought primarily on the Virginia front. But at his start, he was, fighting in the hills of West Virginia, uh, with really mediocre results. He did not have a good time on these campaigns. And the last one is another one of those books along that same line, Robert E. Lee at Sewell Mountain, which is a battle that took place in West Virginia. But in any event, once again, these three books probably keep at least for a little while to at least look through and read. None of them are very long. The text of each one of them is only like 120 odd pages. So I will probably try and give them quick reads. Probably eventually will donate them because I just don't have the room. And I got to give up some room. All right. In the last book, the Hawk's Nest Incident, another local West Virginia history text. For those of you who don't know, Union Carbide was digging a tunnel through. It's called the Hawk's Nest Tunnel. This was also, I believe, in Fayette County, if I'm not mistaken. And they were drilling a tunnel through pure silica, and many of those miners died of silicosis. Their lungs eaten up with the silica that they were breathing in, mining out this tunnel. Let's see. The byline calls this America's worst industrial disaster. I don't know if it was America's worst industrial disaster, but it was certainly up there. And it was once again a Union Carbide disaster. And I know they have a claim on the worst industrial accident in India. Way before most of y'all's time. Back in the 80s, they had a chemical spill at a plant in Bhopal and killed thousands of Indian workers and other folks who lived in the area. But that's Union Carbide. Let's just say not one of the most responsible industrial citizens the United States has. And I believe that's all I really wanted to show you. For this. If you want to take a look at everything I found in the hall, once again, there will be a link to a video where I go through every book, and every book is mentioned in there except the H.W. Brand's biography of Franklin Roosevelt, which somehow I had set to the side and it got left out. Anyway, and I also want to let you know I have an open invitation by Mrs. Bard to come back and look again anytime I want. She gave me lots of leeway, the way I feel about what to do with the books. She says she that her husband really, really, truly enjoyed buying books and collecting books and having amass this huge library, and it gave him great pleasure during his life. It was his one passion. Didn't spend money on much of anything else, but he did spend tons of money on books, and I know the feeling. And we had similar tastes. When I was looking at the collection, there were at least 100 books in his collection that I already have, somewhere in this room. I really miss Dr. Bard. He was a great instructor, very dynamic speaker, really made history come to life. And it was a true honor to be able to go through his collection. And it's one of those situations where if I had more room, oh, I would have brought back hundreds of books, but I just don't have it anymore. So I had to be a little choosier. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about that. Um, I guess the book hunting lesson for this is you never know when opportunities will strike. And this one was a complete surprise. A surprise I'm very thankful for. I got a nice visit with Mrs. Bard. Like I say, got to talk about and conjure up some great memories of a great man. And it was just a great experience. And with that, I will conclude. And as I always say, um, be safe and have good book hunting. Until next time, goodbye.